Hello, welcome back to the channel, and in this video I am going to talk about President Macron of France. Specifically, I am going to talk about this week's news that Macron went to Russia to talk to Putin in an attempt to de-escalate the Ukraine crisis. So this is quite widely reported, and I thought it would be a bit interesting. So what we do know is Macron went to speak to Putin. He came out, he made a statement that Putin had assured him that he would not escalate or worsen the situation in Ukraine. And a mere few hours later, Putin's spokesman released a statement saying no, that had not been agreed or anything, and Macron's talking complete rubbish. Now, there's several different conclusions we can draw from this, and I'll try and go through each of them. But the first thing I would say is that the Russians are well known for doing such things, to divide European leaders. So in this particular page, you can either take the view that Macron heard what he wanted to hear from Putin, or you can take the view that Putin deliberately told Macron what he wanted to hear in order to discredit him later. So either way, the results are pretty much the same. So my message a little bit to Macron is, oh, come on, this amateur hour? You're meant to be an experienced politician. Surely you should not fall for such tricks. Anyone would think it's an election year in France. Oh, so it is. Oh dear. So let's rewind a bit. Why did Macron go there? What was he seeking to do? As I just indicated, it's election year in France. So Macron has two purposes here. He obviously doesn't want a crisis, a war in Ukraine. That's one. But the other is that he needs to look statesman-like, presidential even, in order to improve his election chances. So one way that he has obviously seen to do that is to try and appear as the peacemaker, the negotiator between Russians and NATO. So that is what he went to do. So I think he went there with that specific agenda. Putin would have known that and would have played to it. Putin, no kind of fool, he's a bit of a manipulator, and he certainly doesn't mind making other people look stupid. So Macron went there. They had their meeting, they discussed it. And one of the things that I think is very obvious is the fact that all Macron could say was he had assurances from Putin, pretty much indicated that he basically got nothing out of it. And that's quite often what happens at these sort of high-level diplomacy things, is both sides state their positions, but actually don't really say a lot. The pace is quite slow, and they don't particularly move from their position. And Macron doesn't have much leverage here anyway. He is not being empowered by NATO or the other nations to negotiate on their behalf. And this was a point that was made by Putin. So really, everything that Macron was doing was about Macron. He was there to try and look good, to look like he was achieving something. And Putin let him play that game, and then Putin went and embarrassingly put him down. So by, of course, contradicting him later, making it clear he didn't have the authority, making it clear that actually he, Putin, had not agreed to any such assurance whatsoever. Whoopsie. So what should Macron have perhaps done? And let's assume here that the agenda is to look good for France, for the elections. He may wish to solve the problem, to try and genuinely do good, but you have to be realistic and know that if Putin is going to do what he's going to do anyway, then even the president of France has not got a lot of leverage here. So really, the objective of this particular so-called negotiation is purely PR, purely political. So what Macron should have done to boost his credibility in the negotiation sense, he's done a bit of risk analysis. He should have known that Putin would play this sort of trick to him. Like I said, you've got to be an amateur not to anticipate that. And unfortunately, in his desire to try and look statesman-like and to say, I have secured some form of deal with Putin, he threw caution to the winds. So what he should have done in his statement It made it very clear that Putin had given him assurances, but also added some wording along the lines of, "We shall see, however, if Putin stays true to his word. I have concerns about that matter, but we shall see." Something along to that effect. And then that way, it would have been, there are two things he could have done. One, he could have demonstrated he had gone out and he has done his best, done his bit, as it were, but also that he's exercising a bit of caution, a bit of judgment, that things may not necessarily go as he had hoped. And that would have been better messaging, I think, in terms of the political dynamic in France. I'm not being any expert in that, I'm only speculating here. But the second thing he would have done is actually slightly painted Putin into the corner. Really, he should have played Putin in his own game a little bit here. And what he should have done is said, oh, if Putin says otherwise, he's breached his word to me, to that effect. He made a nice big public statement of it. So when Putin several hours later would release a statement saying, oh, no, it's not what we agreed at all, then at least he can say, well, he breached his word already. That didn't last long, did it? And so that would have been, in a very small way, a bit of a victory to actually undermine Putin. To say, he's not a man that can be trusted, he's not a man of his word, because he'll say just what he wants to hear. Well, that sounds a bit familiar. I wonder what other world leader does that. Would that be a British Prime Minister? Well, I digress. But either way, Macron should be familiar with that. He should have played a little bit of his own political game to suit his objectives. And he failed to do that, and he got to look a bit like an idiot as a consequence of that. So for anyone else who is trying to deal with Putin or the other ministers in the Russian government, they will need to be keenly aware of this, that the political games are being played, and that any statement they make to the media afterwards may well be directly contradicted, denied, whatever afterwards. So unless you can secure things in writing from the Russians, then you're not really going to have much you can do. It's all about the propaganda, it's all about the PR, it's all about perception. And this war on perception, if you like, then you always need to make it look like that you are the reasoned person, the person holding the higher ground, the moral ground, and also the person able to exercise certain judgment. And I fear we can look at Macron and said he threw that judgment away in his desperate desire to campaign politically for the presidential look statesman-like. And in so doing, he did the reverse effect that intended. He made himself look like an idiot. So I trust that was interesting, and look forward to seeing people's comments on that below.